Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast, where we explore the connection between nutrition, performance, and health for busy, active people. My name is Claire Schornstein, and I am a board-certified sports dietitian and endurance athlete with over 10 years of experience working with teenage and adult athletes of all abilities. I started this podcast to provide evidence-based guidance, inspiring athlete stories, and practical tips on a wide variety of nutrition topics so that you can fuel better, crush your endurance goals, and thrive as a human being. Today, I'm chatting with Natalie Robertello, a sports dietitian and owner of BeFueled Sports Nutrition. She found her way into sports nutrition as a way to continue to be part of the athletic community after college and to help athletes take a practical approach to nutrition that helps them feel and perform their best. Natalie and I are chatting all about fat in today's episode. A listener actually requested that I deep dive into fat, and I also realized that this macronutrient hasn't gotten much love from me on this podcast, so I'm really excited to share this discussion with you. We cover all the basics when it comes to fat, also why all saturated fats are not created equally, whether or not you need to limit eggs if you have high cholesterol, if you need to be supplementing with omega-3 fatty acids, if seed oils are actually inflammatory, how much fat athletes need in the diet, where fat fits into a performance nutrition plan, and so much more. Before we get started, though, I would love if you could do me a quick favor. If you're enjoying this show and all the free content that I produce, please consider leaving me a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen and sharing your favorite episode with a friend. And also don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode. All right, here is my chat with fellow sports dietitian, Natalie Robertello. Natalie, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. How's everything going today?
Good. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
And you're in New York, right?
I am. I'm in Western New York in the Buffalo area.
Yeah, right near our good friend Stevie, who has also been on the show many times. So I'm really happy to finally have you on.
She's so close. She's so close.
Awesome. I love it. So whenever I have my colleagues on, I always like to hear, before we dive into our topic today, a little bit about you. So can you share some background about yourself as a dietitian and as an athlete?
Absolutely. So as Claire said, my name is Natalie Robertello. I have been a lifelong athlete. And for me, I actually used to, oddly enough, I love running now, but I used to hate running because it was something that was forced upon me in sports growing up. So of course I didn't love it. But after high school, going into college and thinking a little bit of more about what I wanted to do, I knew for myself, I wanted to stay connected in sports, even if I wasn't going to go play, D1, D2, anything like that in college. So I found my way into sports nutrition. And eventually in 2020, I started my own private practice, my own virtual private practice, BeFueled Sports Nutrition. And here I am. I love endurance sports. I love to run. I was in triathlons in 2014, and I just started to dabble in duathlon. And that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Are you training for anything right now?
I just did a duathlon this past Sunday, which was really fun. The weather absolutely sucked. So there was a down with that. It was just so cold and windy. So the bike was kind of scary. But I have a couple road races coming up this year and a race for a half in the fall. So I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. And so duathlon, is it always swim, bike? Or is there is it just two of the three? Like, do you have to pick which two you do, or how's that work?
Yeah. So triathlon typically is the swim, bike, and then the run. And then the duathlon will be run, bike, run. And just depending on the distance that you sign up for, just depends on the length of the duathlon.
I think I knew that. I just forgot. Okay. Because in my mind, I was like, because I thought I had seen different forms of it and maybe it exists, but okay.
There's so many different formats. It's easy to get lost.
Yeah. I hear you. I was going to do potentially a triathlon this August. I'm very new to swim. I was actually talking with Stevie earlier because I saw she did 4,000 yards in some crazy fast time. And I'm like, holy crap, that is so fast because I'm very much a newbie swimmer. But I was getting into it and I was like, because I'm always a runner and I said I would never do a triathlon, but I was like, actually, I'm enjoying swimming enough that I would consider doing a triathlon, but I've decided I'm not quite ready to do the whole ocean bike thing because I still don't own a bike or a wetsuit, but I think I might, I don't know. I still want to dabble someday, but a duathlon's a little less intimidating because at least it's just 2, not 3 things. Maybe I could do that. I don't know.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's hard to hold ourselves to Stevie's standard because, oh my gosh, she's truly a mermaid in the water. But, the wetsuit is lovely to get because it's just like that security blanket in the water and leaves you feeling a lot more confident once you're out there too. So I believe in you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'll do it one of these days. I really am excited to kind of try something new, but we'll see. All right. So let's get into today's topic now. It's a big one. I'm excited for it. We are talking all about fat. This was a listener topic request. So I got a request to kind of dive into this whole world of fat. And I can understand why, because there's still a lot of confusion out there regarding fat. Is saturated fat actually bad for you? I get clients asking all the time, I'm sure you do too, like, can I eat eggs if I have high cholesterol? Or what about unsaturated fats? And including omega-3s and 6s. And what about seed oils? Because they're getting so much negative attention these days. Or how much fat should I eat in the diet as an active person? And what type or how much fat should I have as an ultra athlete? I mean, there's just like so many questions surrounding fat. So I'm excited to kind of dig into all this with you today, because on the podcast, I've been talking about carbs nonstop for so long, and protein really has gotten the spotlight quite a lot. But poor fat hasn't really gotten much love. So we're going to give fat some love today. And as always, I like to set the stage a bit, because maybe listeners kind of vaguely know what saturated fat is, or unsaturated fat, or trans fat, or all of that, or in where they come from. But I think it's always helpful just to kind of state the obvious anyways, because I know there are people who don't know out there. So I would love for you to kind of give my listeners a quick rundown on the four main dietary fats found in foods, which are saturated fats, unsaturated fats, which we can further break down into polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, and trans fats. And of course, I can jump into to kind of add to anything, but I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you in terms of talking about fats. They don't get enough love in our conversations because we're so focused on carbs for a good reason. But when we talk about saturated fats, these are typically fats that we're associating more with animal-based products. So this would be things like meat, typically things like beef we think of when we think of saturated fats, but it also can be found in darker turkey or chicken, also found in things like butter, oils, and butter, oils, milks, dairy products, things like that. When we look at the other types of fats, we have monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. Like you said, they kind of get grouped into that category. When we look at things like polyunsaturated fats, this is actually where we start to kind of take a look at things like omega-3s and omega-6s. But these are things like nuts, seeds are going to be in this category. And then, of course, the omega-3s, we'll talk a lot more about that, I'm sure. Fish, certain types of oils are going to be in that category too. Then we have trans fats. And I feel like, oh my gosh, trans fats they are what seed oils, at least the scare around it were.
Yeah.
But we know so much more in regards to trans fats at this point versus when we're talking about the seed oils. But trans fats, they get demonized a lot because we do tend to find these things in more of our fried foods and packaged foods. And at this point, right, they are not allowed in products when see them at the store, right? That should be low. It should be negligible. There should not be any in the product. And that's because of the negative impact that it can have on cardiovascular health.
Yeah, so that one, let's just like separate seed oils from trans fats, because trans fats are being demonized for a good reason.
Yes.
Seed oils, not so much. So
yes.
Totally two different things. And I'll add a few more details here to flesh it out, because I was writing down things because, as dietitians, like, we know all this stuff, but we don't memorize all these things. We also have to remind ourselves all the different types of oils and things. So I thought it would just be helpful so saturated fat, we think of as it's solid at room temperature, versus the unsaturated is going to be typically liquids at room temperature, and then it'll form a solid when it's cooled or chilled. The American Heart Association recommends a dietary pattern with less than 6% of total calories from saturated fat. And that's because the link between saturated fat and quote unquote bad cholesterol and heart disease risk. But also remember, like, this is one piece of the puzzle. This isn't everything. Like, we're not just talking about what to limit. We're always thinking about what to include as well. And we're going to go into this whole thing a bit more about saturated fat. Like, is it all created equally and all that? So put a pin in that. Yeah, unsaturated fat, just some types here that, you may have encountered for polyunsaturated. Actually, I'll back up for a minute. It's not like one fat is all saturated or all unsaturated, right? It's a mixture of saturated, polyunsaturated, and monounsaturated. It's just that certain foods are a little bit richer in certain things than others, right? So for instance, polyunsaturated, some that I jotted down so I wouldn't forget, it's canola, corn, soybean, and sunflower oils for the oils, and then other types of foods, fatty fish, nuts and seeds like walnuts and flax and sunflower, and even tofu and soybeans. And then monounsaturated, we've got olive oil, canola, peanut, safflower, and sesame oils, and then also avocados, peanut butter, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, almonds, hazelnuts, and pecans. just as an FYI for anyone who's curious, because I wanted to write it down so I wouldn't forget. And then the other detail I would just add for trans fats is that it's artificially created. So these are human creations, artificial trans fats. That's what we're really worried about. There are some naturally occurring trans fats in small amounts in like meat and dairy, but it's mostly the quote unquote like the partially hydrogenated oils, if you look on an ingredients list, that we want to try to limit and avoid. So yeah, those are the additions I would make. Let's go into the conversation about saturated fats. I think that's one that people are really interested in and still have questions about, especially people who, I'm sure you work with lots of clients, athletes who are in their 40s and 50s and beyond, who are starting to see the effects of aging, who maybe their cholesterol's creeping up or whatever is going on, right? And so maybe their doctor is telling them, okay, hey, your cholesterol's high, your LDL's high, we need to limit saturated fat. So let's discuss. What does that mean? Why do we need to not just look at all of the fats and group them together?
And I get it. I understand. But my least favorite thing is when a client goes to the doctor and gets their lab work done and comes back and says, well, my doctor told me that I need to exercise more, I need to move more, and I need to eat less saturated fats and up my fiber. We may have clients that do really well with that already. But to your point and your original question, when we're looking at saturated fats, like I was alluding to before, there's a variety of foods in there. We have some meat containing actual like animal meat products, and then we have dairy products. We have certain types of oil like coconut oil that is in that category as well. Chocolate. There's a variety of foods that are in that category. But the important thing to recognize and realize is that you have to think about what else is in that product, in that food, I should say. So this is when we start to think a little bit of what is called the food matrix. And the food matrix is basically what else are we finding in that food? Like what other ingredients, what other nutrients are we finding in that food, I should say, and how does that have an effect on cholesterol or cardiovascular health? So some of the research is showing specifically when we look at, let's say, dairy products, even though a whole milk dairy product or a full fat dairy product is going to have a little bit more saturated fat in there, we're finding that it also has other beneficial components, different phospholipids, different micronutrients that are actually very cardioprotective. So they're not finding a negative impact when we're keeping it, of course, within reasonable amounts in our diet.
Yeah.
Negative impacts on our hearts.
Not just taking bites out of the triple cream brie. Darn it.
That can't be my full
Eat
day
it like
of
an
food.
apple.
Exactly. And the same thing with meat. So when we're talking about, types of meats, are we talking about more processed types of meats, or are we talking about less processed types of meats? Same thing when it comes to chocolate, same thing even when it comes to eggs. Is this going to be something we're eating every day, all day? Are we eating it in a respectable amount? I think sometimes we end up really scared to eat these foods because we have a fear of what it'll do.
Yeah, totally. And this is where it all comes down, and it always does, to nuance, right, guys? Right. And this is why I understand why physicians often make recommendations. Like, it's like when you're on a blood thin and they're just like, stop eating vitamin K. It's so much easier to give when you have very little time to talk to somebody, to just give very black and white advice versus exploring the nuance, because nuance is always tricky. So I guess the other question, what this kind of also leads to, and we could use eggs as an example, like what that whole moderation piece, like what does that mean in practice? 1 egg, 2 eggs, like how many times a week? How many eggs a week? Like people want to know these things. And I don't think there's or at least I don't usually give it a precise number to people, but yeah, you don't either. It can be hard if we're not being like, you can have exactly 6.5 eggs each week, like we're not giving that kind of advice, but we are looking at, okay, but are you having 3 egg omelets or 4 eggs or whatever every single day? And you have really high LDL, and we know that this and that, whatever. So, and then what else are you eating? I'm curious, how you go about navigating that gray area with people, because people can get a little confused.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't give a specific recommendation of eat specifically this many eggs per day or per week. Rather, let's look at the whole landscape of what you're eating and how that may have an impact on things. So if someone, like you said, is having that is their breakfast every single day, they're having 4 eggs every morning, and we notice a change in their cholesterol, they haven't made any notations on anything else changing in their diet, well, maybe we will experiment with a slight reduction and adding other foods into their diet and see what happens over the 3 to 6 months until we retest that lipid panel. But, we can't ignore the fact that micronutrients and fiber play a huge role in improving cholesterol as well. So a lot of times I am not so much focused on reducing that saturated fat aggressively. I'm more focused on let's really improve micronutrient content. Let's improve your potassium. Let's improve your fiber intake. And let's take that approach.
Totally. So again, it's not just about what we're limiting, it's what we're including. And also, like, are there really obvious things that maybe, I mean, maybe some people care about this, but maybe you don't. Like, are you having a bunch of coconut pieces or coconut milk or that kind of coconut oil, like those kinds of tropical oil products? Are you having like chicken skin or, really fatty cuts of meat? Are you not cutting away visible fat? Like, are there like kind of low hanging fruit, like things like that? And of course, whenever like if someone's having rotisserie chicken, they're like, that's the best part. And I get it. So it's not always like a low hanging fruit for everybody. But, are there things like that where we can like make little tweaks? It's not to the point where like I just had this discussion with a friend where, she was like, oh, I love my whole milk cappuccino every morning. It brings me so much joy. And I'm like, you do not need to remove that. Like, I am not concerned about that at all for you. Right? Like, let's look at all the other things you're having. Like, that can absolutely stay in there. So if someone's coming to me and they're like, I just love having some butter on my bread, or I just love to have, some cheese on this. And again, are you having like a full cheese and charcuterie plate, or are you having a slice of cheese on your sandwich or something? So we have to kind of pay attention to how you're doing these things in the greater context of diet. That's at least how I address it.
Yeah, the nuance, like you said, is really important. And it's like, what does the day in and day out in the overall profile of things look like over the week? I will, say that a lot of the clients that I work with tend to, and maybe you experience this too in working with endurance athletes, but I tend to see a bit of under eating, honestly, a bit of behaviors that like we're really focused on being healthy. So when that happens, a lot of times unintentionally, not always intentionally, we tend to eat lower calorie, lower fat types of things without even realizing it. So I will say that, yes, it would be important to do some of those things, trim the fat, probably not choose the fattiest types of meat all the time. I don't often see that in working with my clients. It tends to be the opposite end where we're a little too afraid to introduce fat. And that can be problematic as well, because that also can have a negative impact on cholesterol over time.
100%. And I see both cases in my practice. So I get a little of everything. I definitely work with a lot of people who are under fueling and not including fat. And I get some, especially my women who are a little bit older and are kind of hanging on to the low fat era, like for dear life. And I'm like, we got to let that go. Like, that's no good. Kind of along those lines, maybe this is a good segue. Like, fat is important for like a million different reasons. And I guess we haven't even addressed like the role of fat in the body and why it's so crucial. But one thing that it's really important for is just making food taste good. And that's obviously really important. And for like satiety. So like if you're eating something and it adds fullness, and it's important for hormones and for like a million other things. It's also like, and I'm sure you can add to all the different roles that fat plays, but all fats, regardless of which kind, all have 9 calories per gram. So it's much more energy dense than carbohydrate and protein. And the reason why this is so great for athletes is we need more energy when we are active, of course. And so fat's a great way to kind of help fill that gap. Of course, we still need our carbs, we still need our protein, we still need all of the things, but fat can be just like a really great, efficient, I guess you could say, way of getting that energy into your body. And yeah. So I don't know if you want to kind of say a little bit more about the importance of fat, and we can kind of go a little bit more into like what this looks like in everyday diets for athletes.
I think you hit the nail on the head. When we're talking about the role it plays, I think the most important thing that's overlooked is it makes food taste good. And in my opinion, eating a healthful diet is eating foods that you really enjoy too, to really expand the thought process there. But also hormone development, your insulation, supporting healthy body fat levels. When we talk about hormones, of course, we talk about, a healthy cycle for women and a healthy period. Also brain power, heart health, all of those things, play a role. And I know it's not as sexy as something like, when we talk about carbs or protein, but it does play an important role. Even absorption of nutrients. We have to think about those fat soluble vitamins.
Yes, I forgot. I was about to say that. I was like, fat soluble vitamins. I forgot to say that.
Yeah. So if you're eating that big salad and we're like, oh, I'm not going to put oil on this, I'm just going to put some lemon or some apple cider vinegar. No, let's get some fat on that baby to absorb some nutrients.
Yeah. And what I tell people too, and this can, because like, I don't know about you, but I'll get people who, for whatever reason, they just prefer the egg whites. They prefer the non-fat yogurt. They prefer no dressing. And I'm like, cool. I don't care. What other forms of fat can we get in? Can we add nuts or seeds to your yogurt? Could we add some avocado to your egg whites or cheese or something like that? Can we add maybe some nuts or avocado or whatever other form of fat to your salad, cheese, whatever? So, there are lots of ways to do this. I always love to emphasize there's no one quote unquote right way to do this. There are common ways, but there are other ways too. So if one path doesn't work for you, there are lots of ways to get to the same result or a similar result. And ultimately, it just matters what you enjoy and what works for you. So yeah, super duper important. One thing we were talking about offline is how there are body weight based guidelines for carbohydrate intake in the everyday diet and also for protein for athletes, but there's no real set guideline for fat. And I was wondering what guidance you give your clients to help them or to determine how much fat they might need in their meals and snacks throughout the day to meet their total energy needs.
Yeah. And, a lot of times I'll use the general guidelines recommended for Americans, right? And the recommended guidelines, I should say, are 20 to 35%. I think 20%
of total calories. Yeah.
Far too low of total calories. I apologize there. I think that's far too low. So I will generally speaking go for that 25 to 35%. And then of course, if there is any genetic or more recent lab work that came that shows higher cholesterol, we may, play around with that number. It just really depends. But as far as for sport, that's of course a different conversation. There are no specific guidelines of like consume this much per hour like there are carbs.
So what if someone doesn't know how many calories they're eating in a day? So, because I also have that, or I look at that percentage of total daily calories, but a lot of people have no idea what they're taking in or don't really know how much they should be taking in. Do you talk to people about maybe a visual tool or, hey, make sure you choose this amount roughly or anything like that when they're kind of creating their meals or their snacks?
Yeah, in my practice, I like to provide visuals. I'm a visual person, so by nature, I like to share this with them. But if we are not using calories or counting calories, because you don't need to, I'll show them this performance plate and kind of show them there's a space for fat in here. So if we're making sure we're adding a fat source to that meal, if we don't use it in cooking. So if we're not cooking up the meat or the protein in the meal or even adding it to our grain or whatever, then we want to make sure that we're adding that at the end of the meal. The other thing that I like to say is anywhere between 1 to 2 thumbfuls, depending on the source of fat per meal, is another good way to address it. And then, of course, there might be negligible amounts in the snacks that you're consuming to also pick that intake up a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And you can also think about if you're having a snack and you're really hungry soon after, and you look at that snack and you're like, oh, wait, there really wasn't that much fat going on in there. Again, you can add a little fat, or you can add the other macros as well, but fat's an easy thing to kind of add that, again, is a little bit more caloric and that will make you fuller and have some good stuff in there, especially if you're choosing, because we talked about saturated fat, and the differences there, but at the end of the day, we don't want to overdo saturated fat. We still do want to be careful and limit that. And the whole concept being we're kind of replacing some of our saturated fat intake with some of those other unsaturated fats. But yeah, no, I like that. And thinking about if you're having a piece of salmon, that's a very fat rich food, right? Especially if you're putting some sort of marinade that might have more fat, or let's say you're serving it with some roasted vegetables and you used olive oil in that, there might be quite a bit of fat in that meal. So you don't necessarily need to be adding even more fat to that. So I think just kind of looking at your plate and being okay, cool. Am I having something like that? Or am I having a chicken breast with steamed vegetables and rice that I cooked in broth or something? And it's there's no fat there. So that's where it's yeah, I love performance plates. I love just asking my clients to be hey, can you just do a quick visual checklist of being okay, I have protein, check. I have carbs, check. Do I have a fat? Check. And of course, that doesn't answer the how much question. That's a separate conversation. But if you can at least identify hey, I have a fat on my plate, then that's at least okay, that's one step in the right direction.
Totally. And you bring up such a good point. There's going to be foods that contain fats that are also going to contain other macronutrients, right? So salmon's a good example of that. It's a fattier fish. So it is protein, but it also has some fat in it, right? Nuts have the majority, when it comes to macronutrients, the majority of dietary fats, but they also have a little bit of protein in them. So just kind of understanding that too, that different types of foods are going to contribute in different ways to your macronutrients.
Before we kind of go into performance nutrition and fat, I want to just touch on the seed oil thing because it's just so prevalent right now. I did talk about this briefly with another dietitian when we were kind of myth busting. Basically, seed oils are being demonized as very inflammatory. And in case anyone's not sure what seed oils are, because we were both just having a brain fart in this other episode. We're like, what are all the seed oils again? So I wrote them down so I didn't forget. Like, it was like such a stupid moment. I was like, oh my God, we're both two experienced dietitians and we can't generate a list of this. So yes, it's canola, soybean, sunflower, grapeseed, peanut, flaxseed, sesame, safflower, and rice bran. And there are a couple others, but those are the main ones. And they're basically being demonized again as promoting inflammation. This is in part tied way back to like the whole paleo movement. And now it's Maha and everyone in between, right? Just kind of doing all that. And the reality is that seed oils can very much be consumed as part of a health promoting eating pattern. They are rich in, and maybe this is where we can kind of segue a little bit into the whole omega-3 versus omega-6 discussion. Actually, before we get to sports nutrition, I forgot about that. But a lot of the seed oils are very rich in omega-6s. So that's an essential fatty acid, meaning we can't make it in the body. And there is some concern that we're under consuming omega-3s, which is valid. Many people are really very much under consuming omega-3s and over consuming omega-6. So kind of keeping in mind that ratio. I mean, of course, you can chime in here with anything you want to say, but I think the main message to listeners here, and I've already made this point, we've made this point in this other podcast, but a lot of research supports that these seed oils are not actually pro-inflammatory, that human research, so not rodent research, human research has not found linoleic acid, that omega-6, to be inflammatory. So, I mean, we could go deeper into this, but I don't necessarily think we need to. But I mean, do you have anything you want to add to that, or you're good with that?
I think it's just, no, you covered a lot of it. And I think it's just really shows us and tells us that, we can find like one little piece of something in a study and it can just be really big clickbait to be like, oh, this happens all the time. And I feel like, unfortunately, health and wellness, this is so prevalent. I mean, how often have we heard that coffee's good or coffee's bad, eggs are good, eggs are bad? So we really have to be careful in how we interpret the research, and especially when it's a human versus animal study. I mean, who knows, right? Years down the road, maybe we'll find out different. But right now, we have to not encourage a lot of like fear mongering and scare around food, because a lot of people aren't eating enough and supporting their body well. So I don't think we need more fear with it. And especially when the research isn't like, yes, this is indefinitely causing an issue.
Yeah. And so these oils that I'm listing, the seed oils that I listed earlier, many of them are very rich in, again, monounsaturated and or polyunsaturated in different kind of amounts. And really the pattern that we're looking at is that when you're replacing these oils, like you're taking out some of the saturated fats and you're replacing it with some of these unsaturated oils, that's where we see this kind of health promoting effect, or it's, better in terms of risk for, cardiovascular disease and such. So that's kind of the messaging there. That's what I want to point out, that people don't need to be so freaked out about including these things. Like, you can make your fried rice with some sesame oil. It's okay. Canola oil isn't the devil. It's okay. So yeah, I want to kind of park that there and move on to omega-3s, because omega-3s is another one. This goes for everyone, not just athletes, but particularly for active people, because omega-3s we do think of as anti-inflammatory, right? So yeah, I don't know maybe you want to kind of speak to omega-3s, how you see them in your practice, or maybe we can even start with what they are and why they're important.
Yeah. And, if it's okay with you, I know you wanted to park that last discussion, but, and talking a little bit, even when we first opened up and discussed like saturated fats, poly and mono, when we look at the impact that it has on cholesterol, we see that things like, for example, those saturated fats, yes, we have seen higher levels. Again, keep in mind that food matrix can cause a negative or an increase in that LDL cholesterol, which we know to be associated with our health. And then when we look at some of those the poly and monounsaturated fats, they can have an effect on lowering the LDL. So when we look at that and we go back to exactly what you were saying a minute ago, like it's okay to include some of those, like that's what we're seeing through research, right? We're seeing those positive effects there. So keep that in mind.
Totally. Especially when you're freaking out about inflammation. It's like, well, if you want to do things that are good for your health, like pay attention to this other thing. So yeah.
Yes. And cue omega-3. So when talking about this conversation, this one comes up so much when clients ask about like, how can I reduce inflammation? How can I improve things? So Omega-3s come up a lot for good reason because they can have a really positive effect when it comes to not only things like triglycerides. When we're looking at a lipid panel, a lot of times the triglycerides will be there too. And when we talk about inflammation. Now, of course, we think of things like fatty fish as being one of those sources. There's also, when we look at the umbrella of omega-3s, we talk about EPA, DHA, and ALA. So within those umbrellas, there's going to be things like fish is going to be a big one that most people think about, even like different forms of algae come up in there. And then last but not least, chia seeds, flax seeds come up under that ALA category. Now, when we talk about inflammation management, we tend to look more at the EPA and DHA. I'm not saying that the ALA are complete trash and they don't matter. It's just that we require more and the conversion is a little sticky when we talk about that conversion to EPA and DHA. ALA needs to be converted to EPA and DHA.
It's inefficient conversion.
Inefficient conversion. And I think of, a lot of, again, vegetarians, vegans specifically that aren't eating these sources. We also have to make sure that we have a diet that's rich and robust in different micronutrients that can be, I don't want to say are, that can be lacking in these diets to help with that conversion as well.
The bottom line, or at least this is my view of this and what I'm working on with clients, is that if you're not regularly consuming fatty, like marine sources, so fatty fish, so sources of that EPA and DHA, you likely need to supplement. And if you're vegan, you can take algal oil. You don't have to take fish oil. So there is a vegan version, unlike with like collagen doesn't have a vegan version, but here we do have a vegan version of a supplement. So you can supplement with that. Or if you just don't like fish, or like for me, for instance, I just don't eat it consistently enough to get enough in. So I supplement even though I do enjoy fish. So that's something that people can definitely work on. I'm normally recommending about 1 gram a day for supplementation. Is that typically what you're doing as well?
Yeah, if someone isn't consuming fattier sources of fish at least twice a week, then I will move to a recommendation for an omega-3 supplement. So it can be anywhere from 1 to 2 grams. Like 2 is a little on the high side, but in certain situations, I have recommended that. I think the important thing to consider too is when we're looking at, I don't want you to just go and grab a fish oil supplement off the shelf. We want to make sure that 1, 2 grams that is primarily in the EPA and DHA. So flip that bottle over and look that it is specifically coming from the EPA and DHA.
Yeah, there's a lot of really like crappy fillers in a lot of lower quality brands out there. So yeah, look at the label, very important. The other thing, this is more of like a practical thing with fat storage. So if people are using lots of oils, so this is not about saturated fat, but more about the unsaturated fat. So yeah, if you're using any of the oils we listed, they're very sensitive to heat and light, oxygen, and time. So if you've had them for a long period of time. So I know for me, I'm trying to, especially if it's something's in a clear bottle, like I'm either putting it in my pantry, kind of make sure it's away from like a heat source. If it's like a sesame oil, I store that in the fridge. You want to make sure things aren't going rancid and want to toss it. So give it a smell before you use it. A lot of my seeds, like my hemp seeds, chia seeds, and I get ground flax seeds. I keep all of those in the fridge. So yeah, that's just kind of more a practical thing. I don't know if you have any other tips or things related to fats that you want to throw in there.
You bring up a really good point with the oils, especially when we're very worried about, is this something that can cause inflammation? We want to make sure we're using like the right types of fat for like the heat cooking, the method that we're using. So olive oil is wonderful. We love olive oil, but we also don't want to do high temperature cooking in our wok with olive oil, right? We want to consider different types of sources that have like a higher temperature for cooking, like something like maybe a sesame oil in that case. So thinking about that, because, it going rancid, it burning too hot is going to cause issues with that. So that's what I think of when you ask me that question.
This episode is brought to you by my monthly nutrition membership, Fuel for Life crew. Whether you're navigating how to eat on busy days, or fueling for a big race, figuring out a nutrient deficiency, or trying to sift through the confusing world of supplements or whatever else, I'm here to help. Fuel for Life crew is the easiest and most cost-effective way to work with me. For just $30 a month, you get access to tons of nutrition guides, pre-recorded masterclasses, monthly live calls, and a private Slack community where you can browse nutrition topics and connect with me and other members. Also, there's no commitment. You can try it for a month and cancel anytime. I recently gave a presentation in the membership called Fueling on the Fly, Travel Nutrition Tips for Busy Athletes, and that was inspired by 2 of my most popular pieces of free content, my travel snack ideas freebie, as well as my travel nutrition blog post. In this masterclass, I shared nutrition and hydration tips, meal and snack ideas, race travel advice, and so much more to keep your energy high and maximize your performance and recovery, no matter where or how you're traveling. And remember that travel really just means anytime you're on the go, so you really don't need to be going far. You can grab this masterclass on its own for $25, or better yet, join my membership for just $30 and get this plus literally all my downloads and masterclasses plus personalized support from me. It's kind of a no-brainer. Visit my website, eatforendurance.com, to sign up for my memberships or to check out any of my other services and resources. All right, thank you so much. Let's get back to the episode. What do you use when you don't want a strong flavor? Because sesame is great when you're doing, say, a stir fry or fried rice or something like that. But if you're just like, I don't know, sauteing vegetables or something. And what is considered high heat? Like, I don't know, I think about my stove and there's like low, medium, and high. Is medium the high heat, or is it? Because I know we think in degrees, but like that's not how it works on our stove. So how do you think about that? I'm getting nitty gritty with it.
No, you bring up a good point. So like this past weekend, I made like a sesame chicken, and I knew I was going to have to, I got out my cast iron and I was popping the chicken on and flipping it over. And I know that I had on high because I wanted to sear it. I wanted to get it browned. For that, I definitely want to use an oil that can handle something like that, like a sesame oil for high temperature cooking. So in that case, I wouldn't use olive oil. But if I was going to be, just quickly like warming something up, sauteing something, and then adding something in, like making a sauce or something like that, I might use like an olive oil for that sort of thing.
Yeah, because I'm actually thinking about it. I rarely put my stove top on high unless I'm boiling water. I guess maybe I do if I'm doing some sort of stir fry situation, in which case, yeah, I am using sesame oil. But like when I'm just like making eggs, or I'm trying to think what else have I been doing. I don't know. Yeah, sauteing some vegetables or making a chili. Like I always am in the kind of middle part, like at most, and like cooking the onions and all that. And I'm still using olive oil because, like, of course, I've heard this a million times. Like, don't use olive oil high heat. And I was thinking to myself the other day, I'm like, is this too high heat? So another thing you can look for is the smoke point. So it's all about smoke point. So if you have ever left your olive oil on too long and you start to see the smoke and it smells really bad, that's a sign that it's not. Like you're a little too hot there. But I'm thinking about the kind of sauteing that I do where I'm making like a chili or whatever. And it's like, it's not smoking. It's fine. It's hot, but it's not too hot. So that's another thing I guess you can kind of keep an eye out for.
Exactly. Avocado oil could work. It has a little.
Oh, yes. Avocado oil. Yes.
I know we haven't even talked about that, which is shocking, but that one's a little of a higher point. You got me thinking about that question of things that don't have too much flavor. Maybe to me, sesame or a peanut is probably one that has more flavor to me. With the other ones, I don't even notice. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah. Actually, let's talk about avocado oil for a second, because I feel like it's having like a little bit, I mean, nothing new. This isn't like a new thing, but it's been having a moment. Like you see like all the sprays. And of course, now the sprays, it's in pretty much everything you can imagine. They sell it in like coconut and canola and olive and avocado. And I think there's this idea that somehow avocado oil is better than other oils. And I think that's in part linked to the whole seed oil situation. Do you think it's at all related to olive oil? Like, why do you think people are so gung-ho about avocado oil? And I don't know the answer to this. I'm just kind of curious.
Honestly, I'm going to kind of sort of take my dietitian brain off. And avocados, sure, have a nice nutrition profile, but I think we put avocados on a pedestal. Yes, they have more monounsaturated fat. So when we're looking at fat sources, they can be wonderful in that sense. But that's where I think that it comes from, and that we could use it for a little high heat cooking. That's where my guess is with that one.
Okay. Because I'm like, olives are also rich in monounsaturated
right.
fat. But maybe it is the high heat cooking thing. I don't know.
And people feel so passionately about olives. Some people are like, they love them or they hate them.
Yes,
so
that's true.
I don't know.
That's true.
Avocado toast is still so big. So I think we're riding that train of avocado toast still.
I mean, I did eat it today with my eggs. So yes. I'm not going to hate on avocado toast. No. Just please, for the love of God, like add a protein to it. Like, it's just, I can't. Like, how is this still a thing where it's being served with like nothing or just like one little egg? And of course you go out to eat and they charge like $20 for that. And I'm like, come on, people.
We want an egg and a little bit of everything but the bagel seasoning. Have you put that on with it? Like that combination is so good.
No, it's so good. But like one egg is not enough unless you're having I've been telling, actually, this is something, we're getting a little off topic here, but like I see this all the time where like someone will have a slice of sourdough, which, okay, it's a decent slice of sourdough, fine. And there's the avocado and there's a poached egg, looks beautiful. Maybe there's some greens, a little, yummy stuff going on there. And I'm like, that's a snack. Just FYI. And people are like, what? That's a snack? What? They're like, just like, how can this be a snack? I'm like, that is not a meal. That is a snack. You are an active person. You are not sedentary and just sitting around. Like, this is a snack. So just an FYI, peeps, if you have a slice of bread with an egg and toast, avocado, whatever, that's a snack. Just need to throw that out there as a PSA.
You heard it here, guys.
All right, let's talk about performance nutrition and fat. To me, Actually, I think before we get into the ultra things, that's kind of where my mind goes is like ultra running or ultra endurance, anything is where fat kind of comes in. But first, I think it's important. I'm sure everyone's heard this, but we reduce fat before exercise, especially if you're running or doing any running like activities, because it just takes longer to digest and this can lead to some GI stuff. So that's really the time where we, like with fiber, we kind of adjust fat. It doesn't mean you can't include any, like peanut butter obviously is a very common thing to add to your toast, bagel, oatmeal, whatever you're having. And I think this is where some people get confused because they're like, I don't get it. Like everyone's saying to limit fat, but then a lot of people have peanut butter. I'm like, okay, well, if you can tolerate a nut butter, awesome. And if you can't, that's also okay, you know? So yeah, that's one thing. I don't think there's all that much more that needs to be said there unless you can think of something. Is there anything else you want to say more generally about like surrounding exercise and fat?
I think you nailed it. It's a slow digestion, absorption of that. So I think the bottom line here is you want to make sure that you are not waiting until race day. We want to make sure that we're practicing things ahead of time, make sure that we tolerate it, make sure we're not getting any burps, any reflux from a little fat before. Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah. And if you're on a bike or you're hiking versus running or doing whatever other sport, like there will be sport specific differences in terms of what you tolerate. So especially if you're a multi-sport athlete, you can play around with all these different things. You know, maybe you're having an egg with the yolk and that's fine. And so just, again, practice, see what you can tolerate. The main thing is that we have to prioritize carbohydrate. Fat is, of course, filling. So the more fat you have, the less room you might have for other things that you need like carbs. And so this is why also when we're carb loading leading up to an event, we're reducing our fat intake. So that's something to keep in mind with fat. The other thing I would add would be post exercise. So often we're thinking about hydration and carbs and protein. Of course, fat is also important to meeting overall needs. And that's where the omega-3s can be super important in terms of like anti-inflammatory and all that stuff. But yeah, during exercise, when are we starting to think about fat? When does it become important? Why should we be thinking about it? When should we not be thinking about it? Let's talk about that.
I tend to think of it being a bit more important for athletes that are more of an ultra endurance. So we could talk about people who are doing ultra marathons. We can consider multi-sport athletes that might be doing half Ironman, full Ironman. When we are more of that, and even with like half Ironman, Ironman, we have to think about this too. It's when we're looking at more of a low intensity, steady state exercise, that's when fat is going to likely be a little bit more tolerated and have some more benefits because we are going to be out on that course a little bit longer.
Is there like a certain number of hours? Like I get this question with protein as well, right? Because like that's also when we think about including protein. It's like if you're doing like a 2-hour race or something, like we're not going to worry about protein. So when do you think it starts to matter? Like how would you define that when you say ultra endurance?
I will consider it anywhere depending on the person. This could be events that are 4 to 6 hours plus. That's usually when I start bringing that into the conversation. And especially for athletes, when we're looking at building their fuel plan, to just have gels and chews over and over and over, we need a little bit of different flavor profile. We need a little, at some point, your taste buds are going to change. You're going to start to reject the gels just by way of taste. So getting a little different flavor profile in there helps as well.
Yeah. And this is where we're thinking about, again, like the fact that certain foods, whether it's a peanut butter or cheese in a quesadilla or whatever it is, or an energy bar, or, you know, something with another nut or nut butter in a bar, like it's not like you're just sitting there licking a stick of butter. Well, actually, some people do have straight avocados or bacon, or actually bacon's meat. But, you know, most of the time we're consuming fat as part of something else. So often we're taking in the protein. Like, again, if you're an ultra runner and you have some cheese quesadillas at an aid station, or you have a PB&J sandwich or whatever it is. So fat's kind of entering in sometimes in smaller amounts, sometimes in slightly larger amounts, depending on the situation and the person and the duration of the event. But it's entering in with carb, with protein. So that's usually the case. Again, there are instances where people are just eating an avocado or whatever. I don't understand that.
Whatever floats your boat.
Whatever floats your boat. Yeah. So that's usually how it's kind of entering in. And then the other thing I'd say is like you're keeping intensity in mind. So there might be some triathletes, just as an example, like in my mind, triathlon is always higher intensity than ultra, even though I know that's not really true all the time, but a lot of time it is.
Depending, most likely.
Yeah. So, you know, for a triathlete, and especially if you're really like pushing the pace, whatever that is for you, yeah, maybe your tolerance for fat is going to be really low. And we're just including a little bit of protein because protein also takes a little bit more time to digest. So if you're adding protein and fat, like that's a lot going on. So maybe like you're focusing on things like maybe certain bars that have a little bit of fat. Like often I'm telling people, can we keep, like if you're looking at a bar, can we keep it to less than 10 grams of fat or maybe lower, depending on what you can tolerate and how hard you're pushing. Yeah. So this is just going to be something people are going to have to play around with. When we're looking at longer duration events, like really like, especially once we get into like 100 milers and like really, really longer ultras, that's where we see like we have a lot more room for fat to be there. Like people are having proper meals, the fat's going to probably taste really good and it's going to help you with hunger and all of that. And again, there isn't really like a set guideline here. It's kind of just what you tolerate, what tastes good, what's available, what you practiced. I don't know if you kind of go about this in any other way or have any other tips for people.
Yeah. So a lot of times I will, like how you had mentioned, like my go-tos are usually like, depending on their preferences, let's find an energy bar that might work. Let's consider a PBJ to bring with you, just depending on the event. I know for a lot of the triathletes I work with, when we're going to time fat is actually going to be oftentimes like potentially a little earlier, especially if they do find themselves getting hungry. It's probably going to be on the bike. I don't want to throw in much fat later on when we're running, especially if the intensity is higher, because again, our stomach's bouncing up and down. Like it's not going to feel great over time. So like Claire was saying, smaller amounts, we don't need a whole seeing gels out there that are like these fat bombs. We don't need that. We can use food sources and they are going to be a lot more filling if you are going to be doing these 50, 75, 100 mile plus races, which you'll really want something that is more satiating over time for sure.
Do some like examples come to mind, like what some favorite things are? Like obviously like nut butter situation, like anything nut butter based is often very popular. I know like cheese quesadillas are popular. Like, do you see anything else that your clients love to bring or eat at aid stations? Or maybe like potato chips, because that's of course a fat source and it tastes really yummy.
Honestly, I always get from people, they really like PBJs. Bacon has come up before.
Yeah,
certainly. That's been in there before, and I don't blame them. Bacon's in there. Sometimes like putting nut butter on certain things and energy bars tend to be the primary ones I've seen. But, I've definitely heard of some cool things that people include and add, and sometimes, have sandwiches on the course that have things in it to provide a little bit
cheese
of fat.
And bread, like
yes.
Some sort of cheese bread combo, cheese tortilla, cheese cracker.
Yes. Quesadilla sounds awesome. Who's doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I have clients who are making it at home and then they just kind of stuff it in there. So, I mean, because you always have to think about like, do I care if this is cold? Or who was I? Oh, it was Emily Hellman. I think she was talking about pizza. Like pizza is the perfect pack snack. Like you just pack it cold, like stick it in your bag, like munch on that. So again, it's like as long as you can tolerate that, because obviously that is a big dose of fat and some people may not do great.
Oh, I've had people do potatoes too. Potatoes with a little bit of salt.
That usually doesn't have fat though. Oh, people butter on it?
A little bit of butter. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the ones I've had at aid stations are literally just boiled potatoes with salt. I haven't had the butter piece on there.
Yeah. Clients are usually making it at home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I guess if you're doing your own like mashed potatoes or whatever. Do you ever work with people who are doing like really long hikes or backcountry stuff or multi-day things who are kind of like carrying everything they need style stuff?
It feels like last year, but I asked myself, what is time? It was probably a couple of years ago. I had someone doing CDT, the Continental Divide Trail. Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm mistaken. Yeah. She was my one client that I've worked with through those really long treks. And yes, we did a lot with that as far as hydration, as you can imagine, the waters and fats for sure. Massive amounts of calories.
Yeah. So that's one where this isn't, I would say, like my specialty, but I have worked with people who are trying to do an FKT or doing multi-day, like stage racing or other multi-day stuff. Most of the time it's either like self-supported or they're just required to carry everything on them. And I recently gave a presentation to a group of people who were doing more like backcountry stuff and lots of hiking and stuff. And so these are also the scenarios where fat becomes even more important because when you're carrying everything on your body that you're going to eat, like think about, okay, well, obviously something that's 9 calories a gram. So weight really matters. Okay, well, food that has 9 calories a gram versus 4, like obviously you want to lean towards that. But here's where the problem is, like you still need carbs. And carbs are heavy. And so I was just curious if you've kind of dealt with this, worked through this challenge and worked with this population, because it's always this, like, I feel like battle between like trying to get enough carbs, but trying to keep the weight as low as possible because carbs are so freaking heavy. And so everyone always wants to bring so much fat, which is fine to an extent, but we still need carbs. So I don't know. I don't know if you've kind of dealt with that at all. I haven't figured it out.
It's kind of like we go into survival mode with it. It's like, okay, fats are going to keep me alive. And they totally are, but the carbs are going to be needed too. And, I think it's such a fine line because sure, there's probably pieces of us of like, okay, what's going to sound good? And also like I feel like sometimes it's the wrong, and I hope everybody understands what I mean by this, but it's the wrong mindset of thinking like, I want to go into this eating as healthy as possible. And hang with me here, because what I mean is like, we're going to have to do a lot more sugars, a lot more convenience foods. You might have to make pit stops in the areas you're in to grab something from a gas station to get something quick, because you're not going to be able to carry all of that.
Oh, yeah. And to the people I work with this stuff, they're not concerned at all about that kind of thing. I was introduced, I totally blanking on the name, but there was like a really cool company that did, I don't know if it was like dehydrated food or recipes or what it was. Is it Backcountry something? I don't remember, but it was run by a couple dietitians. I'm like, ooh, this looks kind of neat.
I've heard of that before. Mm-hmm.
Is it Backcountry foodie?
I think it is. It's something to that extent.
But with one particular client, we couldn't actually do rehydrated food because not only was water a question mark, which was kind of terrifying, but she was just trying to go as fast as possible. She didn't want to have to stop too often for like stuff like that. But anyways, this is certainly not my sport that I do for myself. And so I'm like learning about it through clients and working through some of these more logistical challenges. But yeah, fat becomes very important in those cases. And I just kind of encourage everyone to, yes, you can lean a little more heavily on fats for those cases, but don't forget about your carbohydrate piece. That would be my message.
And especially, so I think this even, and I don't know if you were going to go in this direction or not, but I know that this comes up a lot in the conversations of like, a high fat, low carb type of situation, and ultra endurance athletes being like, they're performing at low intensities, and fat is the primary fuel source at this lower intensity when we're looking, I think it's 65% of VO2 max, right? But we have to remember that sure, it might be the primary fuel source. That doesn't mean that carbs are negligible. And you might be in and out of those different intensity zones at different points, which are still going to make carbs very, very necessary for you to have those bursts of energy to hit those climbs. Because I know you ultra endurance runners are climbing hills. Like I know it. I see it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And yeah, it's so funny when I was kind of putting together an outline for this, I can't believe I even forgot about high fat, low carb.
I got you back.
Yeah, that's an important piece of this discussion because, I guess it's something that I've talked about quite a bit, just in the sense of don't do it. But yeah, for multiple reasons. Number one, what you listed of like, we're not always in the super low intensity place. Yeah, if you're kind of moving your body up a mountain, that's a higher intensity, but also for other health reasons. Like we know that carbs are so important for bone health and for just like a million other reasons, for your brain, for all kinds of things. So we want those carbohydrates. And I think that there's a lot of dismissiveness, is that even a word, of some of like the things we talked about regarding saturated fat. I think among the high fat, low carb community where it's like, oh, or you're carnivore, it's like, I'm going to eat all this meat and I'm going to eat all this bacon. I'm going to eat all this stuff and it's fine. Like my lab work is all fine. It's like, okay, well, is it? And will it be in a few years? Or is it just you? Like, how would this affect someone else? I think we just have to be really careful. The research certainly does not support that this is a health promoting or performance enhancing way of eating for most people. Look, there will always be outliers. There will be people like if there's someone out there where it's working for them, I'm not going to sit there and be like, this isn't working for you. Like if it's working for you, awesome. But I'd say for most people, for many different reasons, not to mention just like sustainability and living your life as well, it's not really worth it. Don't think I have much more to say there. Is there anything else you want to add to this discussion? I feel like we kind of navigated our way through all the stuff, but is there anything else you can think of that you think we missed?
I really wanted to, I really wanted to add that piece about thinking, because I'll see, and just going back to this VO2 max discussion, I'll see a lot of coaches, for example, kind of post like, this is a fat burning zone, right? This is a carb burning zone. I don't want anybody to be under the impression this means like, okay, if this is a fat burning zone, this means that you only eat fats at this point, or this is a carb burning zone, we only eat carbs. So we really just need the mix of them. I know I'm just repeating what I just said, but I really want to make that clear because I see those graphs out there. I see the way that some coaches talk about it. So I don't want there to be any miscommunication there.
Yeah. So the messaging being, if you are doing an endurance or ultra endurance effort, actually, Steve and I covered this a bit. It's like, how does your intensity, like, do we still need carbohydrate, even if I'm not racing, even if I'm not that fast, and thinking about, well, okay, first of all, what does not that fast mean for you? Like, are you still working hard? But like, even if you're not pushing the pace really hard, like, how long are you out there for? So we still need carbohydrate, even if you're quote unquote not racing it, even if you feel like this is just an easier effort. But like, are you still running a marathon? Like, are you still running a 50K or longer? Like, like, you're still out there for a long time, like depleting your glycogen stores, and you do need to get some carbohydrates in. And then we're always thinking not just about in that moment, meaning in that event, but like, what about afterwards? Because if you didn't eat, yeah, can you run a marathon without taking on any gels? Yeah, you can. You know why? Because I get those clients. I'm sure you do too. And they're like, yeah, that sucked. I'm never doing that again. And then they're kind of broken afterwards. So then we kind of are working with them and helping them feel better. So yeah, always think ahead, not just like in this moment. Oh, well, I did it now. It's like, okay, well, but what was the aftermath of that? So yes, go carbs. Yay. Awesome. Well, I like to finish things up with my quick bites questions. So I'm just going to ask you a few things. What is your favorite pre-workout meal or snack?
Oh, bagel with a banana and a little bit of peanut butter, sometimes cream cheese, but that's my favorite.
Do you guys get decent bagels in Buffalo?
We do. There's a spot here called Bread Hive that's my favorite, but if I can't get there, Wegmans has pretty good bagels.
Did you grow up in Buffalo?
I didn't. I'm actually from Central New York area. So
okay.
Utica, you put a little pin on the map in the middle of New York State, and that is where I am from.
Nice. Okay. What is your favorite post-workout meal or snack?
Ooh, let's see. So many options. I will say I'm usually a fan of having a big glass of chocolate milk, and I'm sure probably a lot of your dietitians say this, but big glass of chocolate milk after, or maybe a smoothie in the summer. Like, I'm very seasonal with my choices, but I would say that's usually like my go-to until I get like a full meal in.
What would you often go to for a full meal? Like, if you're just like, maybe you did your duathlon and you're like, what am I going to grab? What sounds yummy?
I'm a sucker for like a really good sandwich or sub. So if I had the choice of like everything in front of me, it would be that. Pizza, maybe, but it have to be a really good pizza. I'm like a snob when it comes to pizza. It has to be a really good pizza for me to want some.
No, I hear you there. Biggest cooking catastrophe, if you've ever had one?
Oh, cooking catastrophe. Well, yesterday, I am not on starch duty in my house. So my husband and I will split the cooking, and like, I'll think of the meals and we'll put it together. He is on starch duties because yesterday I put a box of rigatoni in the boiling water, and I asked my phone, I'm not going to say the AI, she'll talk to me through the phone right now, but I asked her to set a timer for 7 minutes and let me know, and that never went off. And I
that bitch.
A half hour later, Mike's like, oh, is the pasta done? I was like, oh, it is done. Yeah, in the trash. That's where it's going.
Oh, God. Oh no.
So I don't do this.
AI fails us again. She's so useless, honestly. Yeah, every time I ask her for help, she like doesn't know the answer, so whatever. Okay, what is the most exotic or interesting food that you've ever tried?
I couldn't even tell you the name of the food. I went to Portugal last year.
Ooh, I'm going this fall.
Are you? Oh, we
My
have to
best
talk
friend
about
lives
this.
there.
Oh,
Okay,
we have to
cool.
talk about this. We'll talk about this offline, but it was amazing. And so much, we started off and went over to Madeira, like the island, like off the coast of Portugal. And so they have tons of fishes, and they'll bring out this fish board to you with all fish, just like, of course, like their whole bodies, their eyes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was just like, give me whatever. It was like a fish stew, and there were just I couldn't even tell you what I was eating. Some of it was really good.
Was it an eyeball?
It was like, I know. Some of it I was like, I don't even know what this is, and it tastes bad, and I don't want to be disrespectful. So I tried to eat as much as I could.
Yeah. Like, I know it's good in a way to kind of see the whole animal and like to connect with the animal, but like, even like a rotisserie chicken, I eat just about everything, but even a rotisserie chicken, and you're kind of like picking it apart, I just get like so grossed out. I don't know.
I understand why people don't eat meat. I do.
Me too.
Like, I get it.
I mean, that plus the like animal cruelty aspect and all that stuff. Yeah, I go in these phases where I'm just like, I can't eat this stuff anymore. And yeah, the whole fish makes me not sad, but just, yeah, the fish eyes just always gross me.
Yes, the eyes.
The eyes. I can't with that. And the skin. okay, if skin's done really, really well, like a really crispy skin, I can get behind it. But like a lot of times the skin just really grosses me out because it's like slimy and not done really well.
Yeah. And I was trying to be a brave girl. I was like, oh, I'm going to immerse myself in the culture and eat what they eat. But wow, that was something.
Yeah. No, I feel you there. How do you like your eggs cooked?
I like them over easy. I like to dip my toast in the yolk. So.
Yes, me too. What is your favorite beverage?
Oh, I really like a Diet Coke. A Coke Zero.
Yeah,
a Coke Zero.
You do you.
Specific.
Very specific. See, I don't even know what the difference is. What's the difference between a Diet Coke and a Coke Zero? Are they different?
I think it might be the type of sugar they use. Don't quote me, but I feel like it has a little bit of a different taste to it. So that's probably my favorite. I mean, I don't drink them often, but I really do enjoy when I drink them. So I'm going to rank that high.
I have never been into soda. I've never been a soda person. I don't know.
I like the bubbles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I like seltzer, and I guess I like some fruity things, but like Coke and Sprite and all that stuff, I just never. They got a brief stint, and now I just associate it with college and having like rum and Coke and just being like getting way too sick.
Yes. I also like a good ginger ale. I like a ginger ale, but yeah, I don't blame you. I like the bubbles and a little bit of that sweetness, but I don't necessarily like fruit. Like for seltzer, sometimes it can be like too aggressive for me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But Stevie, again, we'll go back to Stevie. She crushes seltzer. She probably crushes 5 cans a day.
Oh, God. So funny. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
I usually like if I'm going to get it at the store, I have to categorize this stuff. So if I'm going to go to the store, I am always going to, I don't know if you have Perry's, like where you are, if that's like okay. But they have this chocolate cherry panda paws, and it's like a cherry ice cream with like chocolate bits in it.
Ooh, that
it's
sounds
so good. But if I'm going to go out and get ice cream, I usually want like a custard soft serve of like some cool flavor. Like a twist is great, but if they have, like recently I went up to my parents' camp and the ice cream place there had a orange. So I had like an orange custard mixed with vanilla and it creamsicle. So good.
But your parents' camp?
Yeah. So, okay. Maybe, do you call them like cottages maybe? So like, a camp in New York is like a cottage, like a summer house, something like that. Like a summer house. Yeah.
I was like, I'm thinking camp, like where you send your kids. I'm like, do they run a camp? Like, what do your parents do? How fun. Wow.
Yep. That's kind of what like I've grown up always calling it. So like camp is up on the river and that's where you go.
Okay. Oh, that's so funny. I've never heard that before. That's really funny. Okay. Got it. What is your comfort food, or what are your comfort foods?
A chicken soup is one that I really like to make. And I'm like, again, talking about being a snob, I'm a snob about like my chicken soup. I like to make chicken soup for myself. And then I would think the other one that I really love is something that I grew up eating in like traditionally. So my dad's side of the family is Ukrainian, and we'd have cabbage rolls. Some people have heard of them. Like if you're Polish, you might think of them as golumki. We call them polchi, but basically cabbage roll, rice, beef. That's the ultimate comfort food for me.
Yum. That sounds delicious. All right. Last question. Top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
My handheld water bottle. Love it or hate it. Definitely.
Which one do you have?
I have the Nathan. I like is it the EXO something? It's like 18 ounces, perfect size.
Yep.
My sunglasses with these blue eyes, so sensitive to the sun. So need to have those sunglasses. And then a nice pair of sneakers. For my speedy shoes, I like my Brooks Hyperion Max. And then recently I started using Nova Blast, the ASICS Nova Blast, and I really like those. So those are my top 3.
Awesome. Well, Natalie, this was so much fun. I love chatting. We've been like following one another for a million years, but never have actually had like a proper conversation, which is why I love inviting dietitians on my show so much, because we just get to hang out and chat about things. But where can everyone find you if they want to work with you or learn more about all the services you offer?
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram is where I hang out a lot. So at BeFueled Sports Nutrition. It's a long one, but that's my handle. I post a lot of regular content on there. And then if you want to check out a little bit more about my services, I have a membership. I also have one-on-one coaching, and I have a self-paced course. You could go to befueledsn.com and check things out there.
Awesome, Natalie. Thanks for joining me. Have a wonderful day.
Me too.
That's our show for today. Thank you again so much, Natalie, for chatting with me. That was a really awesome discussion all about fats. All right, you guys know what I'm going to ask. If you're enjoying my podcast and you want to keep these episodes coming, the biggest way that you can support me is by subscribing to my show, sharing it with others, and rating and reviewing it wherever you listen. I also do have a Patreon community. I link to it in the show notes if you'd like to join. All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'll see you all next time.